He could buy almost anything in this world, except the one thing he actually needed. That night, inside a ballroom worth more than most people earn in a lifetime, Adrian Sterling, the man Forbes once called the relentless conqueror, stood alone in a dim corner, holding an untouched glass of whiskey, staring at nothing. Around him, 500 people laughed, clinked glasses, and performed happiness for each other. He felt nothing. Then his eyes crossed the crowded room and landed on a woman sitting completely still near the edge of the dance floor. And something inside him shifted in a way he hadn't felt in years. If you've ever felt completely invisible in a room full of people, this story is for you. Stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The alarm on Adrian Sterling's phone went off at 5:47 every morning. Not because he set it that early, but because that was when Emma woke up. Not gently, not quietly. Emma Sterling greeted every single morning like it had personally wronged her the night before. "Daddy." A small hand slapped against his shoulder. Then again, "Daddy, I'm hungry." Adrian opened one eye. The ceiling of his penthouse bedroom came into blurry focus. White plaster, recessed lighting he'd never bothered to adjust, a faint water stain in the far corner that his property manager kept promising to fix. 3 months now, still there. "Give me 2 minutes," he said, voice thick with sleep. "You said that yesterday." "And I meant it yesterday too." Emma made a sound that was half sigh, half growl, and climbed directly onto his chest. She was 7 years old and weighed 54 pounds, but somehow she always managed to find the one spot that knocked the air out of him. "Ow. You're not moving." "Because you're on my lungs." She didn't move. She never moved until he did. Adrian lay there for a moment with his daughter sitting on his sternum like a small, impatient gargoyle, and stared at the ceiling again. Somewhere out in the city, 32 floors below, traffic was already starting. He could hear the faint hum of it through the triple-pane glass windows that had cost more than some people's cars. He thought about the day ahead. Conference call at 8 with the Singapore office. Meeting at 10 with the board about the Meridian acquisition. Lunch he'd probably skip. Another meeting at 2, then another at 4. Then, if he was lucky, if he managed to cut out before 6, he'd be home in time to eat dinner with Emma before she fell asleep at the table, fork still in hand. He hadn't been lucky lately. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'm up." Emma scrambled off him, with the energy of someone who had slept 12 hours and hadn't spent the previous night staring at acquisition spreadsheets until 2 in the morning. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a moment, elbows on his knees, hands loose between them. The bedroom was enormous. It had always felt enormous. When he and Claire had first moved in, they'd laughed about it. "We could fit our entire old apartment in here twice," she'd said, spinning around with her arms out, her dark hair fanning behind her. He didn't let himself think about that for very long. He stood up. "Damned." The kitchen was the best room in the penthouse, not because of the appliances, though they were expensive enough to make professional chefs feel guilty, but because it was the one room where Adrian felt like he almost knew what he was doing. He'd learned to cook out of necessity. In the early days after Claire died, he'd gone through 3 different nannies in 6 months, not because they were bad at their jobs, but because Emma had refused to eat anything they made. She'd sit at the table, arms crossed, jaw set, and stare at the plate like it had insulted her. She was 5 then. She already had opinions about everything. So Adrian had started cooking himself. Badly, at first. He'd burned eggs. He'd somehow undercooked pasta twice in a row. He'd produced a pancake so dense it could have been used as a doorstop. Emma had poked it with her fork and looked up at him with an expression that was equal parts confusion and pity. "It's supposed to be fluffy," she'd said. "I know what a pancake is supposed to be. Then why is it like this?" He hadn't had a good answer, but he'd kept trying. He'd watched videos late at night after Emma was asleep, hunched over his phone at the kitchen island, taking notes on things like how to properly season a pan and the difference between simmer and boil. It had felt absurd. A man who ran a billion-dollar company, taking notes on how to make scrambled eggs. But he'd done it anyway. Now, 2 years later, he could make a passable breakfast. Emma still had opinions, but they were less devastating. "Can we have the banana ones?" she asked from her stool at the island, swinging her feet against the cabinet beneath her. She was still in her pajamas. The ones with the little foxes on them, slightly too small now, the ankles hitting just above her actual ankles. We're out of bananas. You were supposed to get bananas. I know. I put it on the list. The list. Emma had started keeping a grocery list on the refrigerator door using a magnetic notepad that she'd received in a birthday goodie bag and treated like a sacred document. She updated it with great ceremony whenever they ran low on something. She'd started adding things to it that weren't food. Once he'd found more fun written in her careful, slightly wobbly handwriting between orange juice and the good crackers. He hadn't known what to do with that one. I'll get bananas this weekend, he said. You said that last weekend. This time I mean it more. She gave him the look. It was a specific look, one eyebrow slightly higher than the other, mouth pressed flat, that she had inherited directly from her mother, delivered with the same quiet, devastating accuracy. It hit him the same way it always did, somewhere below the ribs, fast and gone before he could acknowledge it. Plain ones, he said. I'll make plain ones. Fine, Emma said, with the magnanimous sigh of someone accepting a lesser outcome gracefully. But can you put chocolate chips in? That's not plain. Plain batter. With chocolate chips. He looked at her. She looked back at him, completely serious. Sure, he said. Why not? By 7:15, she was dressed, backpack on, waiting by the door with the focused impatience of someone who had somewhere important to be. Adrian was still trying to find his other shoe. It's by the couch, Emma said, without looking up from the book she'd opened while she waited. I know where my shoes are. Then why are you looking in the kitchen? He found the shoe by the couch. The drive to Northfield Academy took 22 minutes without traffic and 38 with it. Today was 38. Emma spent most of the ride reading, occasionally looking up to make observations about things she saw through the window. A dog wearing a raincoat. Unnecessary, she declared. A food truck with a long line. What do you think they sell? A man on a bicycle who was somehow carrying a full-length mirror. How is he doing that? Adrian drove and listened and answered when she expected an answer and stayed quiet when she didn't. He'd gotten better at reading the rhythm of it over the years. At drop-off, she climbed out of the car with her backpack, then turned back before closing the door. Don't forget the bananas, she said. I won't. She gave him one more long look, as if calculating the probability of this being true, then closed the door and walked toward the school entrance without looking back. He watched her go. Small figure, bright blue backpack, the slight bounce in her step that she'd had since she first learned to walk, and didn't pull away from the curb until she'd disappeared through the front doors. Then he sat in the car for a moment, in the suddenly quiet, and breathed. Sterling Capital Group occupied the top 4 floors of a glass tower in the financial district, and Adrian's office took up most of the 38th floor. It had views on 3 sides. On a clear day, you could see the harbor. He never looked at the harbor. His assistant, Marcus, was 26, efficient to the point of being slightly unsettling, and had a habit of appearing in doorways without making any noise. He was already in the office when Adrian arrived, tablet in hand, ready. Singapore pushed to 8:30, Marcus said, falling into step beside Adrian as he crossed the floor. Caldwell wants 15 minutes before the board meeting. You have a lunch with Hargrove's team, but I moved it to Thursday because you never eat at those things anyway, and... A brief pause, the kind that meant something mildly unwelcome was coming. Reeves called again. Adrian set his briefcase down on the desk. About the gala. About the gala. Daniel Reeves was Adrian's oldest business partner, and on most days his closest friend, though their definition of close involved a lot of giving each other grief over text message and very little actual emotional honesty. Daniel had been after him for 3 weeks to attend the Whitmore Foundation's annual charity gala, a black tie event that raised money for childhood literacy programs and served as the primary social gathering for the city's wealthiest and most well-connected. Adrian had said no twice already. Tell him I'll think about it, Adrian said. He said to tell you he'll show up at your apartment personally if you say you'll think about it again. He won't. He seemed pretty committed to the idea. Adrian opened his laptop. The screen filled immediately with emails, 47 since last night, 3 of them marked urgent. He pulled up the first one and started reading. Tell him I'm busy. Marcus didn't move. He also said, another pause. And I'm quoting directly here. Tell him Emma needs to see her dad be a human being once in a while. Adrian stopped reading. He sat there for a moment, staring at the screen without seeing it. He said that. Word for word. He seemed to think it would land differently coming from me. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Outside the windows, the city spread out in every direction, gray and silver and moving. He thought about Emma that morning, sitting on his chest. He thought about the grocery list with more fun on it. He thought about the gala, the noise of it, the performance of it, 500 people spending an evening pretending to care about things they mostly didn't care about, everyone networking, everyone posturing, the whole elaborate theater of wealth and connection. He hated those things. "Tell him I'll go," he said. Marcus blinked. "Really? Don't make it weird." "I'm not making it weird. I'm just... Book a sitter for Emma, someone she already knows, not a new person. She'll spend the whole night texting me about it." "Mrs. Callahan?" "Mrs. Callahan." Marcus made a note. "Anything else?" "Coffee," Adrian said, and closed the door. The day went the way most of his days went, relentlessly, without pause, in a direction that felt productive in the moment and somehow hollow in retrospect. The Singapore call ran long. The board meeting produced 3 action items that would each require their own series of meetings to address. He skipped lunch. He took a call in the car on the way to pick up Emma that he shouldn't have taken, and spent the last 4 minutes of the drive trying to decompress enough to be present by the time she climbed in. She knew, anyway. She always knew. "You have that face," she said, buckling her seatbelt. "What face?" "The work one." "I don't have a work face." "Daddy." She looked at him with the calm certainty of someone who had been studying this subject for years. "You have like 5 faces. There's the regular face, and the tired face, and the thinking face, and the phone face, and the work face. Right now you have the work face." He pulled out of the pickup lane. "What does the work face look like?" She scrunched her own face in demonstration. Jaw slightly set, eyes a little distant, mouth in a flat line. He recognized it immediately. He'd seen it in the mirror. "Fair enough," he said. She seemed satisfied by this. She opened her backpack and pulled out a worksheet. "We learned about fractions today. How do you feel about fractions?" She considered this seriously. "They make sense, but I don't think I trust them yet." He laughed. A real one. The kind that came out before he could shape it. Emma glanced over at him, and there was something in her expression then, a quick flash of pleasure, like she'd been waiting for that particular sound. He didn't notice that he laughed so rarely anymore. She noticed. Ikan. Dinner was pasta with jarred sauce because it was Tuesday, and Tuesday had become pasta night by default sometime around the fall. Emma talked about fractions, and a girl in her class named Marigold who had brought an actual live snail to school for show and tell, and a book she was reading about a girl who discovers a secret door in her grandmother's house. "Does the grandmother know about the door?" Adrian asked. "That's the mystery," Emma said, gesturing with her fork. "We don't know yet. What do you think?" She thought about it, noodle halfway to her mouth. "I think the grandmother knows. I think she's waiting to see if the girl is ready." Adrian looked at his daughter across the small kitchen table, the table they ate at every night, just the 2 of them, the rest of the dining room with its 8 chairs gathering very quiet dust, and felt something he didn't have a clean word for. Not sadness, exactly. Not happiness. Something in between, compressed. "That's a good theory," he said. She shrugged like it was obvious. "I have good theories." After dinner, she did her homework at the kitchen table while he cleaned up. And then it was bath time, and then it was teeth, and then it was the book. They were reading a chapter together every night, a different series than the one she was reading on her own. And then, finally, at 8:43, she was asleep. He stood in the doorway of her room for a moment. She slept the same way she'd slept since she was a baby, flat on her back, arms slightly out, like someone who had simply stopped mid-fall. Her nightlight threw a pale orange glow across the ceiling. Her stuffed rabbit, Clementine, was tucked under her left arm. He pulled the door to, not quite closed, walked back down the hallway, down. The penthouse was quiet in the specific, pressurized way that large, expensive spaces go quiet when there is only one adult living in them. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of solitude. It was the kind of quiet that had a shape, the shape of all the noise that used to fill a space and no longer did. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and sat on the couch and looked at the opposite wall for a while. His phone buzzed. "You're coming Saturday. Don't cancel." "Daniel," he typed back. "I said I'd come. You've said that before. I'll be there." A pause. Then, "Good. Wear something that doesn't look like you bought it specifically to not care about." Adrian looked down at himself. He was still in his work clothes, charcoal trousers, a shirt he'd rolled the sleeves up on at some point during the day. He tried to remember the last time he'd worn anything other than some variation of this. He couldn't. He put the phone down, finished the bourbon, sat in the quiet for a while longer, in the chair that faced the window, where the city lights smeared against the glass like something trying to get in. Saturday arrived the way Saturdays did when you'd been dreading something, too fast. He'd spent the week telling himself it would be fine. It was just a party. He'd gone to dozens of these things over the years. He knew how to work a room, how to make the small talk that sounds like something without actually being anything, how to shake hands and nod and smile in the right places. He'd learned early in his career that wealthy people at charity events were, at base, not so different from anyone else at any other kind of gathering. They wanted to feel seen, feel interesting, feel like they belonged somewhere. He just didn't want to do it anymore. But he'd told Daniel he'd go. And Emma, who'd been briefed by Mrs. Callahan, the babysitter, that Daddy was going to a fancy party, had greeted this information with approximately 140 follow-up questions, most of which centered on whether there would be dancing. "There's usually dancing at those things," he'd said. "Are you going to dance?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't dance." "You danced with me at Sarah's birthday. That was different." "How?" He hadn't been able to explain it in a way that satisfied her. She'd filed this information away with the focused attention of someone collecting evidence, and he had the distinct feeling she'd bring it back up at some future inconvenient moment. He dressed in the suit Daniel had basically threatened him to buy 6 months ago. Dark navy, well cut, a shirt in pale blue that Marcus had selected because apparently Adrian could not be trusted to pick his own shirts. He stood in front of the mirror for a moment and thought he looked like someone performing the idea of a man attending a gala. He straightened his tie. Close enough. In the living room, Emma looked him over with the critical precision of a very small fashion editor. "You look nice," she said finally, which, from Emma, was high praise. "Thank you." "You should smile more. You look like you're going somewhere sad." "I'll work on it." Mrs. Callahan arrived, and Emma immediately began explaining the rules of the house to her with the efficiency of a building manager. "This is where the good snacks are. This is what we're not allowed to watch. This is Clementine. Don't put Clementine in the washing machine." Adrian kissed the top of Emma's head. She waved him away without pausing her orientation. He stood at the elevator a moment, hand flat against the closed door, and then pressed the button. Oh, the Whitmore Foundation Gala was held at the Grand Alderton Hotel, in a ballroom that had been built in 1927 and renovated 3 times since, without ever losing the original ceiling. 40 feet of plaster molding and gilded trim above a room full of people who had mostly stopped looking up. Adrian gave his name at the door and collected his table card and walked into the noise. The room was full. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across 500 people in formal wear. Men in black tie, women in gowns that cost more than his first car, all of it moving and shifting and making the specific sound of money relaxing. A string quartet on the far side played something classical that no one was listening to. Waitstaff moved through the crowd with trays of champagne flutes and miniature food that looked beautiful and tasted like very little. He got a whiskey at the bar. Found Daniel almost immediately, which was easy because Daniel was the kind of person who occupied space with confidence. 6'2", broad-shouldered, the kind of man who seemed to belong wherever he stood. "You came," Daniel said, with the particular relief of someone who had genuinely not been sure. "I said I'd come." "You also said you'd come to my wedding and showed up 40 minutes late." "I had a thing. Everyone has a thing, Adrian. I had a wedding." But Daniel was grinning when he said it, the same grin he'd been wearing for the 15 years they'd known each other. He clapped a hand on Adrian's shoulder. "You look human." "Don't push it." Daniel introduced him to 3 different people in the first 10 minutes. A city councilman, a tech founder whose name Adrian recognized from a recent acquisition rumor, and a woman who ran one of the largest hospital systems in the state and had the handshake of someone who wanted you to know it. Adrian talked to all of them. He smiled when it was appropriate. He said the right things. He felt nothing. Around the 40-minute mark, Daniel got pulled into a conversation with someone on the other side of the room, and Adrian excused himself from the group he was standing with and drifted. This was what he usually did at these things. He drifted with his drink, moving just enough to look like he was going somewhere, stopping occasionally to watch the room from different angles. He circled the edge of the dance floor. The string quartet had been replaced by a small jazz band, livelier, and a few couples had started to move toward the center of the room. He watched them without particular feeling. Two older couples, a younger pair who were clearly more interested in each other than in the music, a man dancing with a woman who appeared to be his daughter, both of them laughing at something only they knew. He was about to turn back toward the bar when he saw her. She was sitting at one of the smaller tables near the edge of the dance floor, off to the side, slightly away from the main crowd. Not hiding exactly, but not trying to be found either. She was in a dark green dress that was formal enough, but not elaborate. It looked like something someone had chosen carefully, on a budget, trying to be appropriate for a room like this without overspending. Her hair was pulled back, a few strands escaping at the sides. She held a water glass, not champagne, and she was watching the dancers with an expression that was hard to read from a distance. Adrian watched her for a moment. She wasn't performing anything. That was the first thing he noticed. Everyone else in the room, even the people who seemed most relaxed, were still performing some version of themselves, being charming, being interesting, being powerful, being whatever it was they wanted this room to believe. This woman wasn't doing any of that. She was just sitting there, looking at the dancers with an expression that had something like longing in it, and something like exhaustion underneath that. She was completely alone in the middle of 500 people. He recognized it immediately. He lived it every day. He didn't make a plan. He didn't think it through. He just started walking in her direction, which was not something he did. Adrian Sterling did not approach strangers at parties. He waited, and people came to him, which was one of the many subtle indignities of having money that no one warned you about. He stopped at the edge of her table. She looked up, and for a moment there was something flicker across her face, a quick, instinctive wariness, like someone who'd been surprised too many times by the wrong kind of attention. Then she looked at him more carefully, and the wariness settled into something more neutral. "Hi," he said. Not great, as openings went. He was out of practice. "Hi," she said back. Up close she looked tired, not in a way that detracted from anything, just in the way that people look tired when they were carrying a lot, and not particularly trying to hide it. Her eyes were dark brown, alert despite the exhaustion. "I'm Adrian," he said. Something shifted in her expression when she heard the name. She probably recognized it. His face had been in enough newspapers, enough magazine features that he sometimes appeared in the backgrounds of strangers' photos without knowing it. But whatever she registered, she didn't make a production of it. "Olivia," she said. He gestured at the empty chair beside her. "Do you mind?" She looked at the chair, then back at him, as if running a brief calculation. "Sure," she said, in the tone of someone who wasn't entirely convinced but was willing to find out. He sat down. The jazz band shifted into something slower. The couple who'd been laughing with each other swayed in a slow circle near the center of the floor. "You looked," he started, and then stopped because "you looked lonely" was not something you said to a stranger. "You looked like you could use some company." She considered this. That obvious? Only to someone looking for the same thing. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You're Adrian Sterling." "Yeah." "I've seen your picture in the paper. Nothing too embarrassing, I hope." A small smile, so the first one, brief and testing. "Just the business stuff, the acquisition thing last year." She looked out at the room, and something in her face relaxed very slightly, like a door opening a crack. "I didn't expect to end up in a conversation with you tonight." "What did you expect?" She turned the water glass in her hands. "Honestly, I expected to sit here until it was acceptable to leave, eat a little, watch people, go home." He looked at her directly. "What would make it acceptable to leave?" "About an hour ago," she said. Then she caught herself, as if that had been more honest than she'd intended, and looked away briefly. "I don't really belong at these things." "Neither do I." She looked back at him. A real look. The kind that was actually assessing, not being polite. You're one of the largest donors to this foundation. Your name is on the program. That doesn't mean I belong here. He said it simply, without performance. It just means I can afford the ticket. She sat with that for a moment. The band played on. Around them, the room swirled. All that money and ambition and effort, all those people trying so hard to be exactly what they'd decided they were supposed to be. Adrian sat beside this woman he'd met 4 minutes ago and felt, for the first time all evening, like he wasn't performing anything. How did you end up here? He asked. Not the money question, not the status question, just the actual question. Olivia was quiet for a second. The foundation has a program, she said, for community members. They invite a few people every year through local nonprofits, people who've benefited from their literacy programs or whose kids have. She glanced down at her water glass. My son used their after-school program last year. It's the reason he's reading at grade level now. A beat. They sent me an invitation. I almost didn't come. What made you? She considered this with the seriousness it apparently deserved. My mom, she said finally. She said I spent too much time being afraid of rooms I hadn't been in yet. He looked at her. She's not wrong, Olivia added. No, Adrian said, she's not. They sat for a moment without talking. It wasn't uncomfortable. That was the strange thing about it. It wasn't uncomfortable at all, and Adrian couldn't remember the last time silence with another person had felt anything other than something to fill. What about you? She asked. Why does a man who doesn't belong here keep coming back? He thought about Emma. He thought about Daniel's text, the one about being a human being. He thought about the empty chair at the dinner table that he'd mentioned to exactly no one. My daughter, he said. She has opinions about whether her dad is a person or just a job. Olivia looked at him steadily. I came to prove her wrong, he added. Or right. I'm not sure yet which one would be better. It was the most honest thing he'd said to another adult in months. He wasn't sure why he'd said it. He was fairly sure he wouldn't say it again. But Olivia nodded, slowly, like she understood exactly what that meant. Not with sympathy, with recognition. The particular recognition of someone who had made the same kind of decision more than once, under similar pressure from a small person who loved them and knew them better than they knew themselves. How old? She asked. 7. Mine's 5, she said. Boy or girl? Boy, Marcus. A different kind of smile now. Not testing, not guarded, just real. He's currently obsessed with anything that has more than 4 legs. Insects? Insects, crabs, spiders, anything. He brought home a pill bug last week in his jacket pocket. I didn't find it until the laundry. Adrian laughed. What happened to the pill bug? He's living in a jar on the windowsill now. His name is Gerald. Gerald. He named him. I had no say in it. Adrian shook his head, still smiling. Around them, the room went on doing what it was doing. The band shifted again, something slower, and the dance floor filled a little more. Your daughter, Olivia said. What's she like? He didn't have to think about the answer. He thought about the grocery list with more fun written on it. He thought about the look she'd given him that morning when he told her he'd get bananas this weekend. He thought about 5 faces and the theory about the grandmother and the door. Honestly, he said, she's the most competent person I know. Olivia smiled at that. A full one, both sides, the kind that reached her eyes. It was a good smile. It changed her whole face. That must be intimidating, she said. Every single day, he said. The band slid into something gentle, almost waltz-like, and the candles on the tables flickered in some draft he couldn't feel. And for the next while, Adrian would not have been able to say how long exactly. Neither of them spoke about business or success or any of the things that rooms like this were designed to make you talk about. They just talked. And that in itself felt like something close to extraordinary. The thing about an honest conversation was that it had a momentum of its own. Adrian had been to enough parties to know the pattern. Small talk that circled the same comfortable topics, everyone performing their most polished version of themselves. The whole thing running on a kind of social autopilot that kept things pleasant and meant absolutely nothing. He was good at that version. He'd spent years getting good at it. This was different. He wasn't sure exactly when the shift happened, somewhere between Olivia telling him about Gerald the pill bug and him telling her about the pancake incident with Emma. But at some point, the conversation stopped being the kind you had with a stranger at a party and became the kind you had with someone you'd known long enough to stop editing yourself around. It was subtle. It was also, if he was being honest with himself, slightly alarming. So she just sat there, Olivia said, leaning forward slightly, looking at the pancake. For a full 30 seconds, I timed it. And then? And then she looked up at me and said, "Did you do something different this time? Like maybe there was a version of the pancake that was supposed to look like that." Olivia laughed. A real one, unguarded. And it was a good laugh, the kind that came from somewhere genuine rather than from politeness. It made the tired lines around her eyes ease for a moment. "Marcus does the same thing," she said. "When something goes wrong, he doesn't get upset. He just looks at me like he's running diagnostics. Exactly. Very calm, very scientific about the whole disaster. 5-year-olds are brutal," she said. 7-year-olds don't improve. That's deeply discouraging. "I thought you should know." She smiled again, and this time it didn't disappear as quickly. She settled back in her chair, not quite relaxed, but closer to it than she'd been 20 minutes ago. Adrian noticed she'd switched from water to sparkling water at some point. A waiter had come by, and she'd accepted it with a brief nod and a thank you that was more genuine than most people managed with waitstaff at events like this. He noticed things like that. He'd started noticing things like that years ago, partly because he'd had to learn to read people quickly in business, and partly because, after Claire, he'd become acutely aware of how much information people gave away in the small things, the things they thought nobody was paying attention to. Olivia, for instance, had a habit of glancing toward the exit roughly every 15 minutes. Not anxiously, not like she was planning to bolt, more like someone who needed to know where the door was, just in case. She sat with her back to the wall. She'd turned her phone face down on the table when he sat down. And once, when it had buzzed, she'd checked it with the rapid, practiced economy of someone who'd spent years monitoring messages between tasks, her eyes scanning the screen in about half a second before setting it back down. The babysitter, probably. He knew that particular vigilance. "How old is Marcus?" he asked, though she'd already told him. He wanted to hear her talk about him again. Something happened to her face when she did. 5.5, she said. "He'll correct you if you leave off the half. Very important to him right now." She paused, turned her glass slowly. "He started kindergarten in September. I thought it would be, I don't know, easier maybe. One less thing to manage, but it just meant different things to manage. More expensive things." She looked at him directly when he said that. A quick, assessing look, checking for condescension. He kept his expression neutral, not because he was performing neutrality, but because he wasn't trying to make a point. He was just saying the thing that was obvious. "Yeah," she said after a moment. "More expensive things." She turned the glass again. "I work at a clinic. Front desk, scheduling. Not the glamorous end of healthcare. And I do some bookkeeping on the side for a couple of small businesses. Friday nights mostly, after Marcus is asleep." She said it plainly, without apology or performance. "It covers what it needs to cover, most months." Most months. He understood what that meant. "And his father?" Adrian asked, and then immediately second-guessed it. Too direct, too fast. He started to walk it back. "You don't have to—" "It's okay," she said. "He's not in the picture. Hasn't been for about 3 years." Something in her tone was completely flat when she said it, the flatness of someone who'd spent a long time pressing something down until it stopped having sharp edges. It was better that way. Better for Marcus. He was... She stopped, considered, chose her words carefully. He wasn't someone who was capable of being what Marcus needed. And when I finally stopped trying to make that work, things actually got clearer. Clearer but harder. "Yeah." She looked at him. "Is that how it was for you?" The question landed with more weight than she probably intended. He sat with it for a second. "No," he said. "For me it was just harder. My wife died. There wasn't a decision to make. It just happened, and then everything was different." Olivia's face changed. Not dramatically. She didn't reach over and touch his arm, didn't make any of the gestures people usually made when he disclosed this, the ones that always felt slightly rehearsed even when they were sincere. She just looked at him with an expression that was quiet and direct and didn't try to do too much with the information. How long ago? She asked. 4 years. Emma was 3. Almost 3. He looked at the table. She doesn't remember much, or she says she doesn't. Sometimes I'm not sure. Kids remember different things than we think they do, Olivia said. Not as a comfort, exactly. Just as a fact she appeared to actually believe. My mom says kids remember the feeling of things even when they forget the thing itself. That's either reassuring or terrifying. Probably both, she said. They sat with that for a moment. The band shifted into something up-tempo, and the energy around the dance floor picked up. A woman in a red dress laughed loudly at something, the sound carrying across the room. Someone dropped a fork. The ordinary, continuous noise of people occupying space together. What was her name? Olivia asked. Nobody asked him that. People said your wife, or Emma's mother, or occasionally and awkwardly, your late wife. That strange construction that always made him feel like she was running behind on a schedule. Nobody asked her name. Claire, he said. The word sat differently when he said it here, in this room, to this person. It didn't have the automatic weight it usually had. It was just a name, a real name, the name of a real person. That's a good name, Olivia said simply. He looked at her. Yeah, he said. It was. Another pause. Not uncomfortable. He'd stopped tracking how long they'd been sitting here. He'd lost the thread of the party around them at some point. The room reduced to background noise the way music became background noise when you were actually listening to something else. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He ignored it. Can I ask you something? Olivia said. Go ahead. She hesitated, which was interesting. She hadn't hesitated before. Why did you sit down? I've been at this table for almost an hour and no one else did. She said it without self-pity, just matter of fact. I'm not who people come to talk to at things like this. He thought about the honest answer. He almost gave her the polished version. You seemed interesting. I liked how you were watching the room. The version that was technically true, but curated. Then he thought about what she'd told him, about her mother and the rooms she hadn't been in yet. And he thought about Emma and the grocery list with more fun on it. And he decided the honest answer was better. Because you looked the same way I feel, he said. And I didn't want to stand across the room watching someone else feel that way when I could do something about it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, That's a strange thing to admit to a stranger. I'm out of practice at being strategic. Something crossed her face. Not quite a smile. Something smaller and more considered. No, you're not, she said. You're just choosing not to be right now. He opened his mouth, closed it. She wasn't wrong. Fair, he said. She looked down at her glass and then out at the dance floor, and he saw the longing cross her face again. The same expression he'd noticed from across the room. Up close, it was more specific. It wasn't wistfulness for the dancing itself exactly. It was something else, something older. You used to dance, he said. Not a question. She glanced at him, surprised. What makes you say that? The way you watch them. She was quiet for a moment. My mom taught me. When I was little. She said it carefully, the way people said things that belonged to a time they didn't revisit often. She'd put on records, actual records, on Sunday afternoons, and we'd just dance around the kitchen. Stupid stuff, no technique, just moving. A beat. I haven't done anything like that in a long time. Why not? She looked at him like the answer was obvious. Because life stopped having Sunday afternoons. He understood that too. The way a life could compress itself into what was necessary and leave no room for the things that were just good, just enjoyable, just human. It happened slowly, and then it was just how things were, and you stopped noticing you'd lost anything because you were too busy managing what remained. Do you miss it? He asked. I miss a lot of things, she said. She said it without drama, which made it land harder. You do too, I'd guess. Yeah, but you keep going anyway. Don't have much choice. Neither do I. She looked at him steadily. That's not nothing, you know, keeping going. People underestimate it. He thought about all the times someone had said something approving to him about his success. The company, the money, the acquisitions, the profile, and how none of it had ever felt like what it was supposed to feel like. And he thought about the fact that this woman, who worked a front desk and did bookkeeping on Friday nights and raised a 5-year-old by herself and had never in her life had a conversation with a billionaire, had just said the most accurate thing anyone had said to him in years. He didn't say any of that. He just nodded. "You're easy to talk to," he said instead. "I didn't expect that." "Should I be insulted?" "No, I don't talk to a lot of people. Not really. I talk at a lot of people. Board meetings, conference calls. That's different." "Very different," she agreed. She shifted in her chair, and something in her posture was different now, less guarded or guarded differently, like she'd reassessed something and come to a different conclusion. "You're not what I expected either." "What did you expect?" She considered this with the same seriousness she apparently applied to everything. "Someone more performed. You know, people at these things usually have a whole thing going, a personality they put on with the tuxedo." She tilted her head slightly. "You seem like you left yours at home." "The personality or the tuxedo?" "The performance." He almost smiled. "I'm too tired for it." "Me too," she said. Around them, the room went on being what it was. The noise and the light and the elaborate social machinery of wealth doing what it did. But right there, at that small table near the edge of the dance floor, something quieter was happening, and Adrian was paying close enough attention to recognize it for what it was without yet knowing what to do about it. He hadn't talked to someone this honestly, and he couldn't put a number on it. He'd talked about honest things with Daniel sometimes, but Daniel was his oldest friend, and they had 15 years of shorthand that made it easy to acknowledge things without fully sitting with them. This was different. Olivia didn't have the shorthand. She just listened, and when she responded, it was to the actual thing he'd said rather than to a polished version of it. It was disorienting in a way he hadn't anticipated. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out this time. Not to answer, just to see. "Daniel." Of course it was Daniel. "Where did you disappear to?" "I've been standing here looking interesting for 20 minutes with no one to admire it." He typed back. "Found a better conversation. Give me a while." "Oh?" Then immediately after, "Oh." He put the phone away. Olivia had looked tactfully in the other direction while he checked it, the small courtesy of someone who understood that other people had lives running parallel to any given moment. "Sorry," he said. "It's fine." She glanced at the dance floor. The band had settled into something slower again, a long, easy melody that didn't demand anything from you, just moved through the air. A few more couples had drifted out. "Your business partner?" "Old friend. He's the one who made me come tonight." "Do you usually need making? To leave the house?" "Yes." She looked at him with what might have been amusement. "That seems like a significant problem for someone who runs a company." "The company comes to me, mostly. That's the part they don't tell you about. Once you get to a certain level, you stop going places and places start coming to you." He said it without pride. It was just a fact and not a particularly good one. "It's very efficient and also deeply strange." "I can imagine." She paused. "Actually, I can't imagine, but I can try." "Don't," he said. "It sounds better than it is." "Most things do." "True." She looked at him again, one of those assessing looks she had, the kind that felt like she was actually thinking about what she saw rather than just looking. "Do you have people?" she asked. "Besides Emma, do you have people you actually see?" "Not for work." The question was oddly specific in its accuracy. "Daniel," he said. "And his wife sometimes. My sister-in-law, Claire's sister. She checks in, more than I probably deserve." He stopped. "That's about it, honestly. That's not very many." "No." "I have my mom," Olivia said, "and a friend from work, Deja. She's been at the clinic for 8 years, knows everything about everyone, and makes better cornbread than anyone has a right to. And that's basically it for me, too." She said it without sadness, just as a measurement. "We're both pretty alone for people who supposedly have full lives." He looked at her. "Yeah," he said, "we are." They sat for a moment in that acknowledgement, and it was uncomfortable in a different way than the earlier comfortable silences. This one had an edge to it, the edge of a true thing recognized. Not unpleasant, just real. It was Olivia who moved first, not physically, but she shifted the weight of the conversation, the way someone did when they'd decided something. "Can I tell you something strange?" she said. "Go ahead." "I almost didn't come tonight because I was embarrassed." She said it like she was testing the confession out, watching to see how it held in the air. Not about my dress or anything like that. About just being here, in this room, with all these people. She glanced around briefly, then back to him. I spend all day being invisible. At work, I'm the person who hands you the clipboard and tells you to fill out the top form. When I walk into rooms like this, I know exactly what I look like from the outside. And I thought, what's the point? Nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody's going to remember I was here. She said it without self-pity, without asking for a correction. She was just reporting something she'd observed about how the world worked from where she stood. Adrian didn't immediately argue with it, which was, he suspected, the right call. And then you showed up, she said. And then I showed up. And you sat down and started talking to me about pancakes. In my defense, he said, you brought up Gerald the pill bug. She laughed again. The same real laugh as before, and he felt it somewhere he hadn't felt anything in a long time. Not dramatically, nothing that knocked him sideways. Just a warmth, quiet, in the general region of where warmth was supposed to live. Okay, fair, she said. Gerald was my entry point. Strategic use of a pill bug. I never said I wasn't strategic. She grinned, brief and genuine, and then it softened into something more considered. I'm glad I came, she said. I didn't think I was going to say that tonight. Me neither, he said. About myself, I mean. She tilted her head. You really weren't having a good time before. I was having the time I always have at these things, which is approximately the same as not being here. But now? He looked at her directly. Now is different. The word different sat between them, and neither of them picked it up right away, which was fine. Some words needed a moment before you knew what to do with them. The band finished a song and started another, something Adrian didn't recognize, but that had the slow, deliberate pull of a waltz. He watched 3 couples move onto the floor, and then his eyes came back to Olivia, who had gone back to watching the dancers with that same expression. The longing, the Sunday afternoons. He made a decision before he'd fully processed making it. Dance with me, he said. She turned to look at him. Not surprised exactly. Maybe braced for it. I told you, I don't dance, not anymore. I don't even... I know, he said. I don't either. Then what are we? We'd both be bad at it, he said. Together. Which is less embarrassing than being bad at it separately, which is what we're already doing by watching other people do it. She looked at him for a long moment. That logic is terrible, she said. I know. It almost makes sense anyway. I know that too. She looked down at her hands, then out at the floor, then back at him. And whatever she was calculating, she reached the end of it, because she said, okay. It came out quietly, like a decision made despite better judgment, which was how the best decisions usually happened. He stood and offered his hand. She looked at it for half a second longer than was comfortable, and then she took it, and her hand was cool from the glass she'd been holding, and her grip was firmer than he'd expected, and they walked onto the dance floor together without discussing how to do it or what it meant. They were both, immediately, a little awkward about it. He put his hand at her waist, and she put hers on his shoulder, and they worked out the distance between them the way people did when they were 2 adults who hadn't danced with anyone in a long time. A little too far apart at first, then adjusting, settling into something that worked without being elegant. His left foot found the wrong beat in the first 4 counts. She stepped on his right foot lightly and then said sorry in a whisper, and he said don't be. And they kept moving. The chandeliers above them threw light in pieces across the floor. Around them other couples moved in their own orbits. The music was slow enough to forgive imprecision, which was fortunate because they were imprecise. He didn't look at the other couples. He was watching her face. She was looking somewhere past his shoulder, and then she seemed to realize she was doing that, and she looked at him instead, and for a moment her expression was unreadable. Something working behind her eyes, something being sorted through or decided or simply felt, and he didn't try to interpret it because he had things working in his own chest that he wasn't sure yet how to name. This is strange, she said quietly. Very, he agreed. I don't know why I said yes. I don't know why I asked. She was quiet for a moment, then, I think we both needed to. He didn't argue. They kept dancing. Not well, not gracefully, but continuously. The song went on longer than he expected, and at some point he stopped thinking about the steps, and just moved with the music, or tried to, and Olivia did the same, and the space between them shifted very slightly without either of them remarking on it. He noticed she had stopped glancing at the exit. He noticed that the exhaustion in her face had changed quality. It was still there. It didn't vanish, but it had become a different kind. Less like weight and more like the tiredness that came after something good, after you'd given something to an evening and it had given something back. He thought about Claire the way he always thought about Claire at unexpected moments. Not with the sharp grief anymore, mostly, but with the quiet, complicated ache of someone who had loved a specific person and lost her and was still trying to figure out what to do with all the love that had nowhere to go. He didn't say this. He just let himself think it, which was more than he usually allowed. The song ended. Neither of them stepped back immediately. It lasted only a few seconds. The music stopped, and they were still standing there, his hand at her waist, hers on his shoulder, both of them in the small pause between the last note and the next thing. Then she took a small step back, and he let his hands fall, and they stood there on the edge of the floor. "Well," she said. "Well," he said. "We were terrible." "Absolutely," he agreed. "And nobody laughed at us." I think they were politely looking elsewhere. She exhaled a short laugh. That's the nicest thing about strangers sometimes. They let you be bad at things without making it a whole event. They walked back to the table. He pulled her chair out, not as a performance, just because he was standing on that side and it made sense, and she sat, and he sat, and the band started something new, and neither of them seemed to be in a hurry to be anywhere else. "Your daughter would be pleased," Olivia said. "That I danced? That you were a human being." He thought about Emma, at home right now with Mrs. Callahan, probably having coerced her way into an extra 30 minutes of reading time and possibly trying to show her Clementine's complete collection of invisible accessories. He thought about the morning, Emma sitting on his sternum like a small gargoyle, telling him he didn't move. "Yeah," he said, "she would." Olivia had her elbow on the table now, chin resting on her hand, and she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite categorize, something thoughtful and warm and slightly questioning, like she was still in the process of deciding what this evening was. So was he. The room around them went on, the noise, the light, the industry of wealthy people being philanthropic and social in the same breath. The gala would wind down in another hour, maybe less. Waitstaff would begin clearing glasses. The band would finish their last set. People would collect their coats and find their drivers. And Adrian Sterling sat at a small table near the edge of the dance floor, beside a woman he'd known for less than 2 hours, and felt something he hadn't expected to feel when he'd buttoned that navy suit tonight. Not fixed, not healed, nothing that dramatic. Just present. In the room, in the evening, in the specific texture of this one particular hour. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been present somewhere. Olivia glanced at her phone. The babysitter check, he recognized it. And he watched her face cycle through whatever information she received. It settled back to neutral. She set the phone down. "He's fine," she said, even though he hadn't asked. "He fell asleep watching a documentary about octopuses." A pause. "Of course he did. Better than pill bugs. At least there's no chance of an octopus in his jacket pocket." She looked at Adrian, and something in her expression was more open now than it had been an hour ago. Not open in a way that exposed her, just open in the way a window was open, the difference between inside and outside becoming slightly less defined. "This wasn't how I thought tonight would go." "No," he said. "Me neither." "Is that good or bad?" He considered it. "I think it's good," he said. "Mostly good." "Mostly," she said, acknowledging the qualification rather than pushing past it. "The mostly is just—" He stopped, trying to find the right words. "I'm not used to this. Talking, actually talking, to someone who isn't—" He paused again. "Part of your world," she finished. "I was going to say performing," he said, "but yes, also that." She nodded slowly. "Me too," she said. "I'm not used to people looking at me like—" She seemed to catch herself. "Like what?" he asked. She looked away briefly, then back. "Like I'm actually there," she said. The words were quiet, and she said them without asking for anything in return. No reassurance, no correction. Just a fact about her life, stated plainly, the way she stated most things. He wanted to say something equal to it. He didn't have the words, so he just said, "You are." She looked at him. Something moved across her face. "Yeah," she said after a moment. "I guess tonight I am." The gala was winding down around them in the way that expensive parties did. Slowly, then all at once. Waitstaff had started clearing the far tables. The band had dropped to a quieter register. The crowd had thinned by maybe a third, the early departers having made their graceful exits with the efficiency of people who had drivers waiting and schedules that began early, even on Sundays. Adrian and Olivia were still at the table. He wasn't sure when staying had become the default. At some point during the second hour, it had just stopped being a question. Neither of them had said, "Should we stay?" or "I should probably go." They'd just kept talking, and the evening had kept happening around them, and neither of them had done anything to interrupt it. He'd gotten her another sparkling water without asking, flagging a passing waiter, and she'd accepted it without comment, which meant she hadn't wanted to leave either. Small signals. He'd learned to read them. "Okay," she said, setting her glass down. "Real question." "Go ahead." "If you could eat one thing for the rest of your life, just one thing, no exceptions, what would it be?" He looked at her. "That's your real question." "I said a real question, not the real question. There's a difference." What prompted this? She gestured vaguely at the passing tray of elaborate miniature food, something involving a tiny skewer and what appeared to be a sphere of something that used to be simpler before a chef got involved with it. "I've been watching people eat those for 2 hours, and I genuinely cannot tell if anyone is enjoying them or just performing enjoyment." "The latter," he said. "Definitely the latter." "So, one food, rest of your life." He thought about it seriously because she'd asked seriously. "Emma's going to say pancakes," he said. "I'm not asking Emma." "She would say pancakes because she's trying to rehabilitate my relationship with them, running an ongoing campaign." "And what would you say?" He considered, "My mother used to make this thing. Not a real dish, just something she invented. Rice, some kind of braised pork, a fried egg on top, hot sauce, Sunday nights. She called it the situation because she refused to give it an actual name." He paused. "Haven't had it in 15 years, probably. But if you asked me what I'd want, that." Olivia looked at him with an expression that was soft without being sentimental. "That's a very specific answer. You asked a specific question. Most people say pizza or steak when you ask that, something defensible. What would you say?" She didn't hesitate at all. "My mom's red beans and rice. Every time." She said it immediately, no deliberation. "She makes it every Friday. Has for as long as I can remember. When things got really bad, like actually bad, not just hard, I'd drive 40 minutes to her apartment and she'd have a pot going and we'd just sit in her kitchen and eat it and not talk about anything serious." A pause. "It fixes nothing, but it helps." "Red beans and rice as emotional infrastructure," he said. "Exactly," she pointed at him. "See, you get it." "I get it because the situation serves the same function." "Food your mother made," she said, more to herself than to him. "That's what people actually want. Not the thing, the circumstance of the thing." He thought about that. About Emma, sitting at the kitchen island on her stool, swinging her feet, asking for the banana pancakes. About how the pancakes themselves were almost beside the point. What she wanted was the morning, the specific shape of a Saturday morning with both of them in the kitchen, the clock not yet dictating anything. "You're right," he said. "I know." She smiled. "I'm frequently right. It doesn't always help." He laughed, and she seemed pleased by it, not in a self-congratulatory way, but in the way someone was pleased when they'd made a tired person laugh. Like it was worth something independent of themselves. The band finished a song and the applause was thinner now, fewer hands. Someone near the front of the room was beginning the choreography of the thank you speech. A woman in silver at the microphone, tapping it once, waiting for the room to quiet. Adrian glanced up at the front of the room, then back at Olivia. "The speeches," he said. "How long do these usually run?" "Depends on how grateful they are. Could be 15 minutes, could be 40. She made a face that communicated her feelings about that with admirable economy. We could go find somewhere quieter, he said. If you want? She looked at him. Quieter, like? The hotel has a bar off the lobby. It'll be less crowded, better chairs. She was quiet for a moment, doing that calculation again, the one he'd noticed she did before any decision that involved changing something. Okay, she said. Yeah, okay. They collected their things. Olivia picked up her small bag from the back of her chair, and Adrian caught Daniel's eye across the room. Daniel, who had apparently been tracking their location with low-grade fascination for the past 90 minutes, and who now gave him a look that communicated several things simultaneously, most of them variations of well, well, well. Adrian gave him a look back that communicated don't. Daniel smiled and raised his glass, which meant he was going to say something about this later, and Adrian was going to have to deal with it. Worth it, he thought, and then was mildly surprised that he'd thought it. The hotel bar was called something understated, a single word in brushed gold letters above a dark doorway. And it was, as he'd predicted, quieter. Lower ceilings, leather chairs, the kind of lighting that was designed to make everyone look slightly better than they did under fluorescence. A few people at the bar itself, a couple at a corner table, a man alone with a drink and a book he wasn't reading. They found a table near the window that looked out onto the street below, where the city was doing its late Saturday night thing. Cabs, couples, a group of young people in formal wear who were clearly heading somewhere else, their laughter audible briefly as the door swung open and shut. Olivia sat across from him and looked around with the quiet, assessing attention she gave to new spaces. He'd noticed she did this. She arrived somewhere and took stock of it, not anxiously, just carefully. The habit of someone who'd learned that environments had terms and conditions worth understanding before you committed to them. A bartender came over. Olivia ordered a club soda. He ordered a bourbon, the same one he'd been nursing at the gala, and then hadn't. So, she said, when the bartender left, we graduated from the main event. Seems like. Is that? She paused, choosing. Are you okay with that? Like, were there people you needed to talk to in there? He shook his head. Nobody I needed to talk to. Daniel will find a way to express his feelings via text message for the next 3 days. He doesn't need FaceTime for that. She looked amused. He seemed... She glanced toward the doorway that led back to the ballroom. He was watching us earlier, when we were dancing. Did you notice? I noticed. He had an expression. He has a lot of expressions. This one was... She considered. It was the face of someone who was happy for you in a way that was also slightly smug, like he'd arranged something. Adrian thought about the phone call. Tell him Emma needs to see her dad be a human being once in a while. He didn't arrange anything, Adrian said, but he's going to take credit for it anyway. Credit for what? She asked, and the question landed with the particular weight of something that could mean several things depending on which way you held it. He looked at her. For getting me out of the apartment. She accepted that, nodded once. The drinks arrived. She wrapped both hands around her club soda, the way she'd wrapped them around her water glass all evening. The habitual holding of something, the small comfort of having your hands occupied. Tell me something, she said. Anything specific? Something true. Something you don't usually say. He raised an eyebrow. That's a significant ask from someone I met 3 hours ago. You sat down at my table uninvited and asked me to dance, she said. I think we're past the part where we pretend we're being careful. He couldn't argue with the logic of that. He sat back in the chair, turned his glass slowly. The street outside was quiet for a moment. A gap in the traffic, a held breath. I don't know what I'm doing, he said. With my life, at the scale of the whole thing. He said it carefully, measuring it out. I know how to run the company. I know how to take care of Emma. Those 2 things I can do. But the larger question of what I'm building toward, what any of it is for, I genuinely don't know. And most days I'm too busy to think about it, which is maybe the point. He looked at her. She was listening the way she always listened, not waiting for a pause to insert herself, just actually receiving what he was saying. That's the thing I don't say, he said, because I'm supposed to have a vision. That's the story around me is that I'm a man with a plan, that I see further than other people. And I do, for the company, for business. But for myself, he stopped. Nothing, blank. Olivia was quiet for a moment after he finished. I think that's more common than people admit, she said. Maybe. But most people aren't being profiled in business magazines for their clarity of purpose. Most people aren't being profiled at all, she said, which means they get to not know what they're doing without it being a contradiction. That's either comforting or depressing. Little of both, she said, which was apparently her answer to a lot of things, and he was starting to understand that this was not ambivalence but precision. She refused to flatten things into one feeling when they were genuinely two. Your turn, he said. She looked at the window. The street outside had picked back up, a cab pulling to the curb, someone getting out with a laugh, and a phone to their ear. I'm scared, she said. Just that. Then she seemed to decide she'd started and might as well continue. Not of specific things, just in general, all the time, underneath everything. That something's going to break that I can't fix, that I'm going to get to the end of a month and the numbers won't work and I won't have a solution, that Marcus is going to need something I can't give him. She paused. That I'm going to spend so many years keeping everything together that I'm going to look up one day and not be able to remember what I actually wanted, before all of it just became maintenance. She said it plainly, not asking for comfort, not performing vulnerability, just reporting. That's the thing I don't say, she said. Because if I say it out loud to the wrong person, they start offering solutions, and I don't need solutions tonight. I just needed to say it where someone could hear it. I hear it, he said. I know. She looked at him. That's why I said it. Something sat between them after that. Not uncomfortable, but substantial. The weight of two true things having been said in the same conversation, which was rarer than it should have been, and both of them knew it. Outside, a woman walked by in a yellow coat, talking on the phone, gesturing with her free hand. They both watched her without commenting on it, the brief shared attention of people who were sitting together comfortably enough to look at the same thing without narrating it. Then Olivia said, "Tell me about Claire." He went still for a moment, not defensively, just with the particular stillness of someone for whom a door had just opened that was usually kept shut. "What do you want to know?" he said. "Whatever you want to say." He turned his glass again, thought about where to start, which was always the problem. There were 1,000 places to start, and none of them felt adequate, and he usually avoided starting at all, because once you started, you had to figure out where to stop. She was funny, he said. That was the first thing. Before anything else, she was genuinely funny, not performing funny, not the kind of funny where someone is trying. She just saw things sideways. She'd say one sentence and it would reframe something you'd been looking at wrong for years. Olivia nodded, listening. We met in our mid-20s. She was finishing a graduate program in urban planning. I was building the company. We were small then, 12 people. 2 of them working out of a space that was really just someone's converted garage. He paused. She thought the whole thing was slightly absurd, not in a dismissive way, in the way where she could see both the seriousness of it and the comedy of it at the same time, and she'd point that out, and it would actually help. He stopped, started again. She was the one who wanted the big penthouse, not because she cared about status, she genuinely didn't, but because she wanted the space. She had this vision of all these rooms being used for different things. She was going to have a whole room just for plants. She had a list. He almost smiled. Emma has lists. It's very much from her. Did she see it? Olivia asked. The penthouse. We moved in 2 years before she got sick. She had 14 months from diagnosis. He said it clinically, the way he always said it, because the clinical version was the one he could get through. She saw the plant room. She got about 40% of the way through stocking it before he stopped. The plants are still there. I don't know how they're alive. I water them when I remember to, and I apparently remember just often enough. Olivia was quiet. Emma goes in there sometimes, he said. She talks to them. She says they need conversation as much as water. He paused. She read that somewhere. I don't know if it's true. I hope it is. It might be, Olivia said. People say things like that, and then scientists do a study 20 years later, and it turns out the plants were listening the whole time. Is that comforting or terrifying? I think it's just nice, she said, that Emma talks to them, that someone does. He looked at her. Something had been building in his chest for the past few minutes that he was choosing not to name yet, because naming things too early was how you made them into something they weren't ready to be. What was she like? Olivia asked. As a mother, she only had 2.5 years, he said. Emma was born, and then Claire got sick when Emma was 2, so he stopped. But in those 2.5 years, she was completely sure. That was the thing. I was never sure. I didn't know how to hold a newborn, didn't know the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry, kept getting things wrong. Claire was just sure. Not like she had all the answers, more like she wasn't going to let not having the answers stop her. Emma got that too, Olivia said quietly. Sounds like? Yeah. He felt the familiar compression in his chest, pressed it down. Yeah, she did. They sat with that for a moment. I don't talk about her very much, he said. Claire, they don't know how to respond. They say things that are meant to be kind and sometimes are and sometimes aren't, and the whole thing becomes about managing their discomfort with the subject rather than actually, he made a gesture that meant this, actually saying anything real about who she was. She was funny, Olivia said. She saw things sideways. She wanted a room for plants and she made lists, and Emma got both of those things from her. He looked at her. That's not a lot, she said, but it's real. Yeah, he said, it is. She'd done it without making a production of it, just gathered the things he'd said and handed them back so he could see them as a shape rather than fragments. He didn't know if she realized she'd done it. He thought she probably did. His phone was in his pocket, off. He'd turned it off sometime around the second hour at the gala, which was something he hadn't done voluntarily and he couldn't remember. Years, maybe. Marcus's father, he said, not pressing, just returning the consideration if she wanted it. She looked at her hands for a moment. His name is Tyler. We were together for 2 years. When I got pregnant, I actually thought it was going to work. I don't know why. I'd seen enough of how he was by then. She said it without bitterness, which was harder to listen to than bitterness would have been. Bitterness was at least warm. This was the cold, flat tone of something processed past the point of feeling. He stayed for the first year, not well, but he stayed. And then he left. And for about 6 months, I kept telling myself he'd come back when things got easier. And then I stopped telling myself that. When did things get easier? Adrian asked. She looked up. They didn't. They just got different. She paused. Actually, that's not entirely true. Some things did get easier. Once I stopped spending energy on the Tyler problem, I had more energy for the Marcus problem, and the Marcus problem turned out to be not a problem. It was just Marcus. Her expression changed when she said his name, the same way it always did. He's the least complicated part of my life, which is funny because a 5-year-old was supposed to be the most complicated part. Emma's the same, Adrian said. She's the most straightforward thing in my entire life, and also the thing I worry about the most, which I'm aware is a contradiction. It's not a contradiction, Olivia said. It's because they're the thing you can't outsource. You can hire someone to handle any part of the company. You can delegate anything except them. Except them. He looked at her. She looked back. They were past the point of pretending this was just polite conversation between strangers, and neither of them had said so directly, and both of them knew it, and somehow the not saying was part of the thing, the way certain structures held better without being named. The bar had gotten quieter while they'd been talking. The couple in the corner had gone. The man with the book was still there, still not reading it. The bartender was wiping down glasses with the particular patience of someone accustomed to being background to other people's conversations. Olivia glanced at her phone. He watched her face. The quick check, the reading of whatever message had come through, the small exhale that meant it was fine. Babysitter, he said. He woke up, she said. Wanted a glass of water. She just wanted me to know. She set the phone down, and then something crossed her face. A fleeting thing, there and gone. But he caught it. You should go, he said. Not trying to end it, just saying the true thing. She looked at him. I should, she said. He's fine, she said he's fine. But you need to be closer, he said. I get it. She held his gaze for a moment. Is that? She started and then stopped. What? She shook her head slightly. I was going to say something that was going to sound like I was asking for something. You can ask. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I was going to say, is that okay? That I have to go, which is a strange thing to ask a person you met tonight. He understood what she was actually asking. She was asking whether the evening was going to end cleanly or whether something was going to happen to it when she stood up. Whether the thing that had been building between them across 3 hours of honest conversation was going to survive the transition back into regular life. It's more than okay, he said. Go home to your son. She nodded, gathered herself, not emotionally, just practically. Her bag, her composure, which she always had, just sometimes wore it more visibly than others. They stood at the same time, and for a moment they were both standing on the same side of the table without having planned it, facing each other in the low light of the hotel bar while the city went on outside the window. I want to see you again, he said. He said it the same way he'd said everything else tonight, plainly, without wrapping it in anything. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her expression, surprise or something adjacent to it, and beneath that something he couldn't name, something careful and hopeful at the same time, which were usually opponents, and here seemed to be operating as collaborators. That's, she started. I know, he said. It's fast. It's not that it's fast, she said. It's that I don't. She stopped, tried again. My life is very specific. It has a very specific shape. There isn't a lot of room in it for. She looked at him and seemed to abandon the sentence. What would it even look like? I don't know, he said honestly. I don't have a plan. You don't have a plan. Not even slightly. She looked at him, studying his face with the same careful attention she'd given everything tonight, as if she was trying to determine whether the lack of a plan was a problem, or whether it was, in its own way, the most trustworthy thing he'd said. I work Monday through Friday, she said finally. I do the bookkeeping Friday nights. Saturday mornings, Marcus goes to a soccer thing at the Y. He's terrible at soccer, genuinely bad, but he loves it, so. She paused. Saturday afternoons are usually free. He understood. Saturday afternoons, he said. I'm not promising anything, she said. She looked at him. I haven't had a conversation like this in a long time. I'm not sure I've had a conversation exactly like this ever. And I'm not prepared to just. She made a gesture with her hand. Let it be one night, he said. Yeah. Neither am I. She stood there for a moment, and he could see her processing something. Not him, exactly, but the situation, the shape of it, what it could mean if she let it. He recognized the particular expression of someone who was used to being careful weighing something that required not carefulness, and not knowing yet which instinct to trust. Okay, she said. Saturday. He nodded. Saturday. She started to move, and then she stopped. She reached into her bag and pulled out a receipt from somewhere, but it looked like a grocery store receipt, the long, thin kind, and held out her hand. He found a pen in his jacket pocket, and she wrote her number on it, the receipt going soft where she'd folded it, her handwriting quick and unself-conscious. She handed it to him. He looked at it for a second, a grocery receipt with a phone number on it, in a hotel bar at 11:30 on a Saturday night. He folded it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, next to where his phone was sitting, dark and off. I had a good time tonight, she said. I want you to know that, in case it's the only chance I get to say it. Why would it be the only chance? Because life has a way of. She didn't finish the sentence, just shook her head slightly. I'm cynical. Occupational hazard of being a person. Fair, he said. I had a good time too, in case you were wondering. I was, a little. I know. She walked to the door of the bar and he walked with her. Not because he was going the same direction, just because the evening deserved that much. At the lobby, she turned to face him one more time. The hotel entrance was visible through the glass doors, her car presumably somewhere in the structure across the street. Get home safe, he said. You too. She looked at him. I mean, home. Not safe specifically. I just. She laughed, a short one, at herself. I don't know why I said safe. You live in a penthouse. Safe in the metaphorical sense, he said. Yeah. She looked at him. That. She pushed through the door and walked across the lobby, and he stood in the entrance of the bar and watched her go. The green dress, the way she moved, efficient and purposeful even now, even tired, even at the end of an evening that had turned into something she hadn't expected. She went through the hotel's front doors. The lobby returned to its regular state of being, a family at the check-in desk, the concierge on his phone, the quiet hum of expensive carpet and good lighting. Adrian stood there for another moment. He reached into his jacket pocket and touched the folded grocery receipt without taking it out. Then he turned and went back to the bar and sat down and finished his bourbon slowly, in the quiet, and did not mind the quiet for the first time in a very long time. His phone was still off. He left it off. He sat there for 20 minutes thinking about nothing in particular and everything at once, the way you did when something had shifted and you hadn't figured out yet which direction, but you were fairly sure, not certain, not even close to certain, but fairly sure, that it had shifted towards something rather than away. Outside through the window, the city went on doing what it always did, indifferent to the small things that happened inside it, the conversations and decisions and moments that didn't register anywhere but mattered anyway. He looked at the window for a while. Then he put on his coat and settled the tab and went home to his daughter. He didn't text her Sunday. He wanted to. He picked up his phone twice, once after Emma went to bed Sunday night, once Monday morning before the alarm, and both times he set it back down without doing anything. Not because he'd changed his mind, more because the grocery receipt with her number on it felt like something that deserved more consideration than a Sunday night text that said, "Hey, it was good to meet you," which was the kind of text that could mean anything and therefore meant nothing. He wasn't sure what he wanted to say yet. He wanted to be sure before he said it. Emma noticed the phone picking up and setting down on Sunday night, because Emma noticed most things. "Who are you texting?" she asked from the couch, where she was theoretically reading but had clearly been watching him over the top of the book. "Nobody," he said. "You keep picking up your phone." "I'm allowed to pick up my phone." "You look like you're deciding something." He put the phone in his pocket. "How's the book?" She gave him the look, the one eyebrow, the flat mouth, and went back to reading, which meant she'd filed the observation away rather than abandoned it. He knew she'd come back to it. She always came back to things. Monday was a full day, the kind that started at 7:30 and didn't stop until nearly 7, and he spent most of it in rooms with other people talking about money and strategy and risk, all of which required the full weight of his attention and got it. He was good at compartmentalizing, always had been. It was one of the things that made him effective, and one of the things that had made his marriage, in certain specific ways, harder than it needed to be. Claire had called it his submarine mode, the way he could seal off entire chambers of himself when the work required it, and emerge hours later as if the sealed chambers had never existed. She hadn't said it as a compliment. He didn't think about Olivia during the day. Or rather, he noticed around noon that he wasn't thinking about her, which was itself a form of thinking about her, because the not thinking was a deliberate thing, a choice he was making every time a gap opened up in the schedule. During the board meeting, he was present. During the call with the Singapore team, he was present. During the 2:30 review of the Meridian projections, he was present. But in the car on the way to pick up Emma, in the 11 minutes of stop-and-go traffic on Reed Street where he usually spent the time cycling through emails, he let himself not think about work. He thought about a grocery receipt folded in the inside pocket of a suit jacket. He thought about Saturday afternoons are usually free. He thought about the way she'd said, "I'm not promising anything," in a tone that made it clear she wasn't saying no. Marcus had a soccer thing at the Y on Saturday mornings. He was genuinely bad at it, but he loved it. Adrian had filed this information in some quiet part of himself without meaning to. He texted her Monday night after Emma was asleep. It took him 4 attempts to write something that didn't sound like it had been drafted by a man who had spent 15 years communicating primarily through prepared remarks and board memos. The first version was too formal. The second was too casual in the way that was obviously trying to be casual. The third started with "so," which felt wrong. The fourth was, "This is Adrian. I wanted to make sure the number worked before Saturday." He stared at it for a full minute. It was not elegant. It was also completely true. He did want to make sure the number worked. He had been slightly anxious about this since Sunday, and saying so was at least honest. He sent it. He set the phone on the coffee table and went to the kitchen and poured water and drank it slowly and came back. The typing indicator appeared almost immediately, which meant she'd been awake, which meant she'd had her phone nearby, which meant nothing definitive, but something. It works. Hi, Adrian. He sat down on the couch. How's Gerald? He typed. A pause. Then, thriving. Marcus added a stick to his jar today. Very enriching environment. Full spa experience, basically. How's Emma? He looked at the phone. The question was so simple and so... He wasn't sure of the word. Natural. It was natural. Like it was something she just wanted to know, not a social nicety deployed to keep the conversation moving. She caught me staring at my phone and told me I looked like I was deciding something, he wrote. She was correct. What were you deciding? Whether to text you. Another pause, longer this time. And? I did, he wrote. So I guess I decided. He could almost hear her laughing at that, or not quite laughing. The small breath of amusement she had, the one that wasn't quite a laugh but lived in the same territory. Good, she wrote. I was going to give you until Wednesday before I assumed it wasn't happening. Wednesday specifically? It felt like a reasonable deadline. Not too eager, not giving up. That's very calculated. I told you. I'm frequently right. He smiled at his phone in his empty living room. It was 11:14 on a Monday night, and he was texting a woman he'd met at a charity gala and smiling at his phone like someone who was 26 years old and had not yet learned to be cautious about things. He was aware of the absurdity of it. He didn't particularly care. They texted until close to midnight. Nothing significant, nothing that needed to be said, just the low-stakes back and forth of two people getting used to each other's rhythm on a page. She told him that Marcus had declared his soccer cleats to be too tight on my feelings, a phrase she'd repeated because she wasn't sure she'd ever heard anything more accurate about ill-fitting shoes. He told her that Emma had informed him at dinner that she'd decided to become a marine biologist, specifically to study bioluminescent creatures, and then corrected him when he'd said that sounds hard, by explaining that nothing worth doing was easy. A statement she delivered with the authority of someone who had arrived at this wisdom independently, rather than having heard it approximately 400 times. She's 7, Olivia wrote. She's been 7 for 4 months, and she's already better at it than most adults. Marcus told me last week that sharing was just stealing with permission. He's not wrong. That's what I said, and then I had to immediately say I was joking because I'm trying to raise a functional person. He went to bed at 12:15, which was later than he'd gone to bed in months, and slept better than he had in longer than that. Tuesday through Friday moved at the pace of weeks that contained things you were looking forward to, which was to say faster than they should have, and also, perversely, slower in the hours when he was most aware of looking forward to something. He and Olivia texted most evenings. Nothing structured, no schedule, just the occasional message that the other one replied to when they could. She went quiet for the whole of Thursday, and he didn't push it, and Friday morning she sent bookkeeping night. 2 clients Q3 reports. Send help. He'd sent back, what kind of help? She'd sent a long string of numbers that made no sense out of context, and then, just kidding. I've got it. How was your week? He'd told her about the Meridian acquisition stalling on a regulatory issue he should have anticipated and hadn't. And instead of offering a platitude about how these things happened, she'd asked 2 sharp questions about the specific nature of the regulatory concern that revealed she understood more about how these things worked than her job title would have suggested. He'd answered both questions seriously, and she'd said, "Sounds like you need someone in regulatory affairs who actually talks to the operations team," which was, in fact, exactly the problem, and something his team had been dancing around for weeks without saying directly. "How do you know that?" he'd typed. "The clinic I work at has been through 3 different compliance reviews in 4 years," she'd written back. "Front desk sees everything." Also, I read. He'd shown Daniel that exchange without explanation. Daniel had read it twice and then said, "Who is this woman?" in the tone of someone who was revising a hypothesis. "Someone I met at the gala," Adrian had said. "I know where you met her. I mean," Daniel had set the phone down. "She's sharp." "Yes." "You look different this week." "I look the same." "You look like someone who's been sleeping." Adrian had taken his phone back. "Don't make it weird." "I'm not making anything," Daniel said, and then made a gesture that made it clear he was making several things simultaneously. I'm just noting, you've looked like you were operated by remote control for 2 years, and this week you look like you're... He paused. In the building. In the building, Adrian had repeated. Present. In the room. Whatever. Don't make me say something sincere. You know I find it uncomfortable. Adrian had almost said something sincere back, and then had decided against it on grounds of mercy. Saturday arrived. He dropped Emma at Mrs. Callahan's. Emma had been briefed that he had plans, not what kind, and she'd accepted this with only moderate interrogation, and drove to the address Olivia had sent him Thursday night. A park, she'd said, not far from her apartment. Marcus's soccer thing finished at 11:30. They'd go home and have lunch, and she could meet him after, say 1 o'clock if that worked. It worked. The park was the kind of city park that had been there long enough to feel permanent. Old trees, uneven paths, a playground with one piece of equipment that was always slightly broken, benches placed at intervals that suggested someone had once thought carefully about where people wanted to sit. He found a bench near the central path at 12:58 and sat down with a coffee he'd bought 2 blocks away and waited. She arrived at 1:04 slightly out of breath, in jeans and a jacket the color of old bricks, her hair down. He hadn't seen it down before. She was walking fast and slowed when she spotted him, and for a half-second before she got her expression arranged, he saw something cross her face that he didn't try to overinterpret. Just that she'd seen him, and something had happened. "Hi," she said, dropping onto the bench beside him. "Hi. Sorry." Marcus decided that the cleats needed to be retied approximately 4 times before he could leave the Y, and then he remembered he'd left his water bottle inside. "It's 4 minutes. Still," she exhaled. "You brought coffee." "I didn't know what you wanted. I have an extra." He held up the second cup. Black, which is probably wrong. "It's fine." She took it, wrapped both hands around it the way she always held things. "Black is fine." She looked at him over the rim. "You look less..." She stopped. "Less what?" "You were in a suit last time. You look less..." She made a vague gesture. "Armored?" She laughed. "I was going to say corporate, but yes, okay. Armored is more accurate." He was in dark jeans and a sweater, which was about as unarmored as his wardrobe currently went. He made a mental note about that. "You look..." he started. "Don't," she said. "I was going to say comfortable." "Oh." A beat. "Thank you, I'm trying." She looked out at the path. A man jogged past with a dog who was running much faster than the man. 2 kids on bikes, an older woman with a rolling cart. Marcus asked where I was going. "What did you say?" "I said I was going to have coffee with a friend." She glanced at him. He asked if the friend was a boy or a girl. "I said a man." He asked if it was a date. She paused. "He's 5. "What did you tell him?" "I said I wasn't sure yet." Adrian looked at her. She was staring at the path. "That's honest," he said. "I'm trying to be." She turned to face him. "I need to be upfront with you about something. 2 things, actually, and I'd rather do it now than later." "Okay," he said. She held her coffee cup in both hands and seemed to organize herself. He waited without filling the silence, which was the right thing to do, and he knew it. "First thing," she said, "I have very little margin for error. In my life, financially, emotionally, I'm operating with small reserves of both, and I have been for years, which means I can't afford to..." She chose words carefully. "I can't afford to get into something that I then have to get out of. It costs too much. Not just for me." She looked at him. "Marcus doesn't know you exist. I need to keep it that way until I know what this is. If it goes nowhere, then we go nowhere. And that's fine, and it's better that he never knew. But I need you to know that he comes first, and if at any point this..." She gestured between them. "If this starts costing him anything, it stops. That's not negotiable." "Understood," he said. He meant it completely. "I'm not trying to be cold," she said. "I'm trying to be clear." "There's a difference," he said. "You're being clear. I appreciate it." He paused. "Emma's the same for me. Same principle." She nodded. "Okay. Second thing." She looked out at the path again and then back at him, and this time her expression was slightly more exposed. Not uncomfortable, but working. "I'm not good at this. I haven't..." I've been alone for 3 years. And before Tyler, it wasn't much better. It was just a different kind of alone. So I'm not going to be smooth about any of this. I'm probably going to pull back sometimes for no good reason except that I'm scared. I'm probably going to say the wrong thing. Olivia. She stopped. I burned a pancake so badly my daughter thought I'd done it on purpose, he said. I talked to a houseplant last week because I felt guilty about forgetting to water it. I have 5 work faces, according to a 7-year-old. I don't think either of us is in danger of being smooth. She looked at him for a moment. Something in her face settled. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She turned back to the path. A bird landed on the bench across from them, regarded them with the frank disinterest of birds, and left. I liked your text this week, she said after a moment. Yeah? The one about Emma and the marine biology thing made me laugh for about 3 minutes. Marcus heard me and came in to see what was funny, and I had to explain bioluminescent creatures to a 5-year-old at 9 o'clock at night. Did it go well? He wants to know if they glow like a nightlight or like a phone screen. He has thoughts. What's the answer? I have no idea. I told him we'd look it up. She glanced at him. We looked it up. He's now deeply invested in anglerfish specifically. That tracks, Adrian said. The anglerfish is objectively fascinating. It's terrifying is what it is. Also that. She smiled. Not the testing smile from the gala. Not the brief one she'd used when she was still deciding something. This one was easier, more familiar with itself. Like the week of texts had moved them somewhere, and the smile was marking the location. Can I ask you something? He said. Go ahead. The bookkeeping, the 2 clients on Thursday. Is that sustainable? Long term? She looked at him, and he watched her assess the question. Whether it was intrusive, whether it was the kind of caring that was actually control in a different coat. He kept his expression neutral and waited. It's not ideal, she said finally. The clinic hours are stable, but they don't grow. The bookkeeping covers the gaps. What I actually want... She stopped. What do you actually want? She looked slightly uncomfortable, the way people did when asked to say the thing they'd been keeping sensible by not naming. I want to go back to school, she said. Accounting. Actual accounting. Not bookkeeping for 2 small businesses on Friday nights. There are programs at Hartley Community College, night classes. I could be licensed in 2 years. She paused. But the program costs money I don't currently have, and I'd need more childcare hours. And she made a gesture that encompassed the complexity of it. It's the thing I think about and then stop thinking about because the path from here to there has too many steps I can't currently afford. He was quiet for a moment, not in a way that was building to an offer. He knew better than to make an offer 10 minutes into the first time he'd seen her in a week, to a woman who had just told him with complete clarity that she needed to do things on her own terms. He was quiet because he was actually thinking about what she'd said. 2 years, he said, if I did the accelerated track. 2.5 otherwise. What's the tuition? She looked at him. Ballpark, he said. I'm not... He paused. I'm just listening, that's all. She held his gaze for a moment, checking, and apparently found what she was looking for. Around $14,000 for the full program, she said, which doesn't sound like a lot to most people, but it's a lot, he said. Yeah. Have you told your mom about it? She made a short sound. She'd try to give me money she doesn't have. I can't let her do that. She turned the coffee cup slowly. Deja knows. She thinks I should just do it. Deja's approach to obstacles is to walk directly through them and then be surprised when it worked. Does it work? For Deja, somehow, yes. For me, I'm built differently. She looked at him. I need to know the floor before I step on it. That's not a flaw, he said. I know, but it means I'm still standing in the doorway while Deja's already in the room. You came to the gala, he said. She looked at him. Your mom said you spent too much time being afraid of rooms you hadn't been in yet, he said. But you came to the gala, and you talked to a stranger who sat down at your table uninvited, and you danced even though you hadn't in years. And you're here, he paused. You step on floors, you just check them first. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the path. That's a generous interpretation, she said. It's an accurate one. She didn't argue. She sipped her coffee and seemed to be doing something with what he'd said, not discarding it, not immediately accepting it, just holding it to see how it felt. He'd noticed she did that with things. She didn't perform reactions. She had them, on her own schedule. They walked after that. Neither of them suggested it. They both stood up at around the same time and started down the path, which was wide enough for two people to walk side by side with a few inches of comfortable space between them. The park was full of the ordinary weekend crowd. Families, couples, solitary people with headphones, children who kept running slightly ahead and then stopping and turning to see if the adult was still there. He told her about Emma's week, the marine biology phase following the bioluminescent creatures conversation, the grocery list to which Emma had now added more outside time. Apparently she'd been watching him spend too many Saturdays doing conference calls from the kitchen table. The parent-teacher email he'd received on Wednesday saying that Emma was, and he was quoting, an asset to class discussion, though occasionally her certainty about her own positions can make group consensus challenging. She's confident, Olivia said. She's certain, he said. There's a difference. Confident means you believe you might be right. Certain means you know it. Is she usually right? He thought about it seriously. Yes, he said, which is probably making the teacher's job harder than it needs to be. Olivia laughed. Marcus is the opposite. He'll agree with whoever spoke last. His teacher said he's a great collaborator, which I think is code for he's very agreeable. Nothing wrong with agreeable. No, but I want him to know it's okay to push back sometimes. That his opinion is worth something even if it's different from everyone else's. She paused, glancing at a pair of kids on the grass. It's hard to teach that when you're also teaching him to share and take turns and not scream when someone takes the thing he wanted. The simultaneous lessons, Adrian said. Hold your ground. Also be kind. Also wait your turn. Also speak up. Also listen. Exactly. No wonder they're confused. We give them completely contradictory instructions and then wonder why they grow up anxious. She looked at him. Do you think about that? Emma being the things she'll carry. He was quiet for a step or two. All the time, he said. Specifically what she's taking from watching me. Whether she's learning the right lessons about how to be a person. He paused. Whether watching me work the way I work is teaching her that work is what a person is, rather than what a person does. What do you think she's learning? I think she's learning to be competent, he said. I think she's learning to be independent. I think she's learning that love doesn't require someone to be perfect. He paused again. I hope she's learning that last one. I'm less sure. Why? Because most of what I show her is me being capable, he said. I handle things. I fix what's fixable. I try not to fall apart in front of her because she's 7 and she shouldn't have to hold any of that. He looked at the trees. But I wonder sometimes if the message she's getting is that capable people don't need anything. And I don't... He stopped. You don't want her to learn that, Olivia said. No. She was quiet for a moment. I think she knows, she said. What makes you say that? Because she made a grocery list that said more fun, Olivia said. She's not asking you to be more successful. She's asking you to be more present. She can see the difference. She glanced at him. Kids who think their parents don't need anything don't write more fun on the grocery list. They write it because they can see you need it, and they love you enough to be specific about what they need from you. He didn't say anything for a moment. They walked past a section of the park where someone had set up a small folding table and was selling used books, paperbacks in uneven stacks, a handwritten sign with the prices. Olivia stopped without warning, and he stopped beside her, and she looked over the table with the focused attention she gave to things she was genuinely interested in. She picked up a novel, read the back, put it down. Picked up another, thinner, older, the spine slightly cracked. She turned it over. Have you read this? She asked, holding it toward him. He looked. He hadn't. It's good, she said. One of those, you forget you're reading it. It just becomes where you are. She set it back down. The man at the table was watching them with the patient attention of someone accustomed to browsers. Get it, Adrian said. I have books I haven't read yet. That's never a reason not to get a book. She looked at him. That's a very rich person attitude toward books. It's a correct attitude toward books. She looked at the novel for another second. Then she picked it up and gave the man $2 from her jacket pocket. He thanked her, and she thanked him, and she put the book under her arm, and they kept walking. My mother would have bought 6, she said. Smart woman. She's the smartest person I know. She said it simply, without qualification. She raised 3 kids on what my father made driving a bus, kept us all in school, never once made us feel like we were missing something even when we absolutely were. She paused. She knew when to say something and when to just make the red beans and rice and not say anything. That's a skill I haven't mastered yet. When to not say anything. When to let the food do the talking. She glanced at him. I usually say the thing. Sometimes that's right. Sometimes I should have let someone just eat the rice. I'm the opposite, he said. I usually don't say the thing, and then it accumulates. Until someone like Emma writes more fun on a grocery list, and I have to acknowledge that I've been running a submarine for 2 years. Olivia stopped walking. He stopped too, turned to look at her. She was standing in the middle of the path, a couple edging around her with the mild patience of people who'd learned to navigate sudden stops, and she was looking at him with an expression that was new. Not the assessing look, not the careful look, something less guarded than both. What? He said. Nothing, she said. You just... She shook her head slightly. You said something Claire used to say. He looked at her. The submarine thing, she said. I say that, I use that word, for when people seal themselves off. She paused. It's probably not an unusual metaphor. People probably say it all the time. Probably, he said, but it landed funny. She looked at him steadily. Good funny. Not bad funny. He held her gaze. Okay, he said. They started walking again. The path curved around the south end of the park where the older trees were, the ones that had been there long enough that their roots had started lifting sections of the pavement in polite, slow-motion protest. Olivia stepped over a raised edge without looking at it, the automatic navigation of someone who'd walked this particular path many times. Do you bring Marcus here? He asked. Every weekend, basically, she said. He knows every tree. He has names for some of them. She pointed to a particularly large oak near the fence line. That one's Harold. Harold. He named it after his pediatrician, who he thinks is very old and very reliable. That's a compliment. The doctor does not know about it. I'm keeping that information private. She glanced at him. Emma have any trees? She has houseplants, specifically Claire's plants. He paused. She calls the large one near the window Frank. Olivia looked at him. Then she started laughing, a real one, the full version, and she put her hand over her mouth briefly like she was trying to manage it and then gave up. Frank, she said. Frank, he confirmed. Marcus and Emma both naming things, she said, still smiling. Harold and Frank. They'd get along, she said, and then seemed to realize what she'd said, the implication of it, the forward lean of it, and looked at him carefully. He was already looking at her. Maybe someday, he said, carefully, not pushing, just leaving it there, the same way she'd left Saturday afternoons are usually free, as a door, not a demand. She nodded once. Maybe someday, she said. They walked for another hour. The conversation moved the way it always did with her, not in a straight line, but continuously, looping back and forward, from Marcus's anglerfish phase to the Meridian acquisition, to her mother's apartment on the other side of the city, to the book tucked under her arm, the way things moved when two people were genuinely interested in each other's thoughts, rather than performing interest while waiting for their turn. At some point their arms brushed and neither of them moved away, and a few minutes after that her hand was in the crook of his elbow in the way that happened when you'd been walking beside someone for long enough, and it seemed like the natural next arrangement. He didn't point it out. She didn't either. When they got back to the bench where they'd started, she checked her phone, the time, not a message, and said she needed to go pick up Marcus from her mother's, where he'd been dropped after soccer. Okay, he said. This was... She started. Yeah, he said. I keep saying things are not what I expected, she said, but I keep meaning it. I know. She looked at him for a moment, in the gray afternoon light under the old park trees, the book under one arm and the empty coffee cup still in her other hand. She looked tired, the same way she'd looked tired at the gala. like someone who was carrying a lot. But there was something different in it now, something that had been added rather than taken away. He thought about what he wanted to say and chose the simplest version. "I'm glad you checked the floor before you stepped on it," he said. "But I'm also glad you stepped." She looked at him, then she leaned forward and kissed him once, brief and deliberate, on the cheek. Not quite close to the corner of his mouth. Not quite not. She stepped back. "Next Saturday," she said. Not a question. "Next Saturday," he said. She walked away down the path, and he stood at the bench and watched her go, and the park went on around him, indifferent and full of life. He stood there for a while after she'd gone. Then he called Emma. "How's Mrs. Callahan?" he asked when she picked up. "She let me have 3 cookies," Emma said. "Don't tell her I told you." "How many did you actually have?" A pause. "That's not the point," Emma said. "Fair enough. I'm on my way." He started walking toward the park exit. He passed Harold the oak tree on the way out and looked at it for a moment. Large, old, reliably present in its spot. He kept walking. The Saturdays became a thing. Not immediately, and not without friction. The first few weeks had the particular awkwardness of 2 people who were both out of practice and both too self-aware to pretend otherwise. There were silences that went slightly too long. There was a Saturday in early November when Olivia canceled an hour before they were supposed to meet because Marcus had a fever, and she'd spent the whole day texting Adrian updates that she clearly felt guilty about sending, each one slightly more apologetic than the last, until he'd written back, "Stop apologizing. Go take care of your kid." She'd sent a single. "Okay." And then, 3 hours later, 102.4. He asked if Gerald had ever been sick. Adrian had written back, "What did you tell him?" She'd written, "I said Gerald was very resilient." He'd written, "Smart." She'd written, "I have my moments." By December, the Saturdays had expanded slightly at the edges. A Tuesday evening here, a phone call there. The kind of organic growth that happened when 2 people stopped managing something and started just letting it be what it was. He learned that she made coffee too strong and knew it and didn't care. She learned that he had a specific brand of bottled water he bought in bulk and arranged in the refrigerator with the labels facing forward, which she found deeply funny and he found difficult to explain. He learned that she cried at wildlife documentaries but not sad movies, which she explained by saying that animals didn't choose their circumstances, and humans mostly did. She learned that he kept a notepad by his bed because ideas about work came to him at 3 in the morning, and if he didn't write them down, they sat in his chest like stones until the alarm went off. They did not tell the kids. They had agreed on this explicitly, in the park on the second Saturday, and both had kept to it with the careful conscientiousness of people who knew what a mistake would cost. Emma knew something was different. She'd told him around Thanksgiving that he had a new face, which she was cataloging as number 6. And when he'd asked what it looked like, she'd said like the regular face, but like it has somewhere to be, which he thought was possibly the most accurate description of contentment he'd ever heard from anyone, let alone someone who was 7 3/4. But she didn't push. Emma had learned, somewhere in the years of watching her father manage things alone, when to push and when to wait, and she was waiting. Marcus apparently told Olivia that she smelled like a different kind of soap on the Saturdays, which she'd reported to Adrian with a look that was equal parts alarmed and charmed. "He notices everything," she'd said. "I don't know what to do with that." "Neither did I," Adrian had said. "I still don't. I've just accepted it." January brought cold weather and a complication. It came in the form of an article, a small item in a business section, the kind that would have been invisible to anyone not looking for it, under a headline about the Meridian acquisition finally clearing regulatory review. The article was mostly about the deal, but someone had pulled a photo from the gala, one of those ambient shots that event photographers took throughout the evening, everyone slightly unaware, the candid record of a room full of people being themselves. In the background of the photo, slightly out of focus, were 2 people at a small table near the dance floor. A man in a navy suit, a woman in a dark green dress, close together, talking. The caption didn't mention them. The photo was small. Most people wouldn't have looked twice. Daniel saw it. He sent it to Adrian on a Wednesday morning with the single message, "This is going to get picked up eventually." Adrian had looked at it for a long time. Then he'd forwarded it to Olivia without comment and waited. Her response came 40 minutes later, which meant she'd sat with it. I figured something like this would happen at some point, she wrote. I just didn't know when. Are you okay? He wrote back. A pause. Define okay. Do you want to talk about it? Yes, she wrote. Not over text. He rearranged his Thursday afternoon and drove to the clinic at 4:30 when her shift ended. He waited in the car. She came out in her work clothes, dark scrubs, a jacket over them, and got into the passenger seat and sat there for a moment looking at the windshield. People are going to find out, he said, not as a warning, just as a fact that needed to be said plainly. I know. She turned to the strap of her bag in her hands. I've been thinking about what that means. For Marcus. He's going to hear things. Kids at school. Their parents talk, and kids over here, and... She stopped. I need him to hear it from me first, before anyone else. Okay, he said. She looked at him. Okay as in you agree? Okay as in whatever you need to do, we do. You know Marcus, you know what he needs. I'm not going to tell you how to handle your son. She was quiet for a moment. He's going to ask questions I don't have answers to yet. Like what? She turned to look at him directly. Like what you are to me, what this is. She paused. I've been deliberately not defining it because defining things makes them breakable, and She stopped. I was scared that if I named it and then it didn't work, it would be worse than if I'd never named it. He sat with that. Outside the car, the clinic's parking lot was doing its end-of-day thing. Nurses changing shifts, a couple of cars pulling out, a man helping an elderly woman into a vehicle with the patient, careful attention of someone who'd done it many times. What do you want it to be? He asked. She looked at her hands. I want it to be real, she said. I want it to be the thing that it actually is, not the thing I've been carefully managing it into being. She looked at him. Is that... She started. It's real, he said. It's been real for a while. I just didn't want to push you into naming it before you were ready. I'm ready, she said. I'm terrified, but I'm ready. Those aren't mutually exclusive. No, she almost smiled. They're not. He reached across the center console and took her hand, which was something they'd worked their way to in small increments over the past months, and she turned her hand over in his without looking at it, the automatic response of something that had become familiar. Tell Marcus, he said. Do it the way you need to do it. And then whenever you're ready, both of you, I'd like to meet him. She was quiet. Not because of the photo, he said, because he's yours, and you matter to me. And those things are connected. She exhaled slowly. He's going to ask you about Gerald, she said. I know. He's going to want to know your position on pill bugs. I have no strong feelings about pill bugs, which I think makes me neutral enough to be acceptable. He'll respect that, she said. He's very fair-minded. She paused. He's going to like you. That's almost scarier than if he didn't. Why? She looked at him. Because if he didn't like you, it would be easy. I could protect him and protect myself, and it would all be very clean. She paused. But if he likes you, then you're all in, Adrian said. Then I'm all in, she said. He held her hand and she looked out the windshield, and neither of them said anything for a moment. The parking lot finished its end-of-day shuffle. The light was going the way January light went in this city. Fast, without ceremony, the afternoon folding itself into evening before you'd quite finished with it. I'm scared, she said. Not the way she'd said it in the hotel bar, as a confession in the abstract. This was specific. Here, now, this. Me too, he said. She looked at him. Emma doesn't know either, he said, and she's going to have... He paused. It's been her and me for 4 years. She handles change well, generally, but this is different from regular change. This is... He stopped. I don't know how she'll react. She might be fine. She might not be. I genuinely don't know. And you're willing to find out, Olivia said. Not a question. Yes, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside the window, someone's phone screen lit up briefly in the dimming lot. Yeah, she said. Me too. She squeezed his hand once, then let it go. She had to get back to Marcus. He had to get back to Emma. The ordinary logistics of their lives, which had not stopped being complicated just because something good had entered them. That was not how life worked, and they both knew it, and that was okay. She got out of the car, came around to his window and knocked on it once with her knuckle, the way she had a habit of doing, a small gesture that didn't mean anything specific and meant several things in general. He rolled the window down. "Saturday," she said. "Saturday," he said. "Bring Marcus." She looked at him steadily, then she nodded. "Bring Emma." She walked away across the parking lot in her scrubs and her brick-red jacket, bag over her shoulder, and he watched her go and thought about the word all in and decided it was right. It was the right word. He'd been moving toward it without using it for months, and now that it had been said, he found that it didn't frighten him the way he'd expected. It just sat there, solid and specific, like a thing that had always been true and had been waiting for someone to name it. He drove home. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table. Mrs. Callahan had already gone. The dinner he'd prepped Sunday, a pasta bake, nothing impressive, was in the refrigerator waiting to be heated. Everything was ordinary and familiar and exactly as it always was, and he stood in the kitchen for a moment, just taking that in before Emma looked up. "You have the new face," she said. "I know," he said. "Where did you go?" He put his keys down. He opened the refrigerator, got the pasta bake, put it in the oven. Then he came and sat at the kitchen table across from his daughter, who had her pencil in her hand and her homework in front of her, and was watching him with the patient, interested attention of someone who had been waiting for a conversation for approximately 3 months. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Okay," she said. She put the pencil down, folded her hands on the table in front of her. She looked in that moment disconcertingly like a very small adult who had convened a meeting. "I've been spending time with someone," he said. "A woman. Her name is Olivia. And she has a son who's 5. His name is Marcus." Emma was very still. "I like her," he said. "I like her a lot. And I wanted to tell you before you heard it some other way." Emma looked at the table, then back at him. He waited. He didn't try to fill the silence, which was one of the hardest things he'd done in recent memory, because his instinct was to manage the moment, to fix whatever she was feeling before she'd finished